Welcome everybody to another edition of Think with a Drink. This is the weekly webinar series brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. And this week, Craig, we are doing Should I Buy or Should I Lease? And we're not just talking about renting versus owning a home or a car or things, basically rolling it all in there because a lot of the conversation has been about interest rates and where things are and what's going on and what that's all going to mean. So we'll go through, should I buy or should I lease? Before we get started with that, we do want to say, told you that Think with a Drink is brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. You can visit us on the web at ariesfoundation.org. We are a nonprofit dedicated to the mission of trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with your money. And just like every other personal relationship that you have, there are behaviors and triggers that cause us to act, well, a little irrationally sometimes when we're dealing with our money and our finances. That's all myself, Craig, the rest of the ARIES team tries to do is help everybody take a little bit of that emotion out of the equation. My name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the ARIES Foundation. I have been in financial services for now in my 24th year. I'm an investment advisor. That means that I act as a fiduciary whenever I'm giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I want to bring my vice president in. Craig, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the vice president of the ARIES Foundation. I've been in financial services over 19 years now, and I specialize in working with families, individuals, and helping them to find their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
And before we go any further, so that for those who are listening or who listen into the future, so that we record these, we share them on our site, we share them on our YouTube channel. Craig is toughening it out here. He has come down with COVID. Again, God bless COVID. Like, how do you get COVID nowadays, right? It doesn't seem to be there anymore. But Craig got COVID. He's fighting through it. He's toughing it out here, manning up, right? Cowboy up to be on the episode here this evening.
I'm proof that no good deed goes unpunished. I went to pick up my in-laws at the airport, and they came back from a cruise with COVID, and an hour in the vehicle with them, and I got a present. So
there you go. That's it. That was like the perfect fun, like the little incubator there, stuck in the car with somebody who's got COVID. You're not avoiding it at that point. That's worse than the plane. God bless. We call this Think with a Drink. And the reason we call it Think with a Drink is that we try to make but financial and money. That was finance and money coming out as funny. How about that? Finance and money management, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more casual. Yes, even a little fun sometimes for us in terms of what we deal with. And we can't think of a better way to do that if we have something cold to sip on. And for tonight, this is Daniel's Irish Red, which is from Black Hat Brewing. I believe they're in West Bridgewater or East Bridgewater or Bridgewater, one of those Bridgewaters, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
It's, I'm a sucker for anything that's a red or a brown. So, anytime I see something like that, I'm always ready to pour and at least try it and see what we got. The Irish Reds tend to be a little drier than the American, not as much caramel usually, but we'll see.
Okay. Oh, I like that.
But you can get that. It's a drier hop finish there on the tongue.
No, very smooth.
Yeah, I mean, generally reds will be smooth, but usually you get a little bit more of that caramel, that taste to it.
Smell it, but I just didn't taste it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a much drier finish, but that tends to happen between the American versus the Irish Reds. That's all. But like I said, I'm a sucker for that. So
the Irish Red brewed in Bridgewater, Mass.
Yeah. But these aren't like the what are those? The triples or the Belgians, where you have to be brewed in that certain place, otherwise it doesn't count. It's like you can say it, but it doesn't. You can't really call it that. You can brew an Irish beer anywhere.
As long as you have red hair.
Yeah, or with a little leprechaun kicking around someplace. All right, so our agenda for this evening, we're going to talk just briefly on whether or not cash is still the king. This is something we did a while ago, where we're talking the difference between cash and credit and how that sort of works into this. And then we'll go into buying versus renting, i.e. a home, a car, things, and then the realities of what happens there with debt and some of what's going on here in terms of today's world. All right, Craig. So is cash still the king? Well, when we did this last time, we did this as a 5-round bout between cash and credit as far as who was going to win. On acceptability, safety, anonymity, rewards, and credit score as the 5 rounds that we put it in. And honestly, cash was not the king. It lost in a 3-2 decision to credit in that realm there. It's funny because this happened recently with my daughter. She went to buy a car.
Yeah.
Wanted to pay cash for it, and the dealership told her no. She had to do it in order to get the deal. She had to finance the car.
Oh, because they get a kickback on the
finance. You got a kickback, right? So there's some of that. You got to be aware that stuff is out there. It was funny. I'm like, well, wait, shouldn't I get a better deal? I'm paying cash.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on who you're buying from. I mean, some dealerships, yes, some dealerships, no. I mean,
right. And we'll talk about that when we get into the dealerships, because the interesting thing with that is as we go through it. But so just understand why cash may feel like it's king. The reality in today's world, it's probably plastic rules the world.
Yeah.
All right. So briefly, on the housing market, right? Where housing was, literally even just over a year ago, right? There's sort of a year and a half, like the beginning of 2022, where rates were at that time, and where they are now has basically taken the housing market and basically spun it on its head.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's quite that kind of a rocket down. I mean, the issue is, especially in certain areas, inventory is still an issue, right? And you're still having a little bit of a bidding war when it comes to actually getting houses. So
not as much now because of the rates. And the reason that you're losing inventory and why I'm saying this is because you have a lot of people who normally would sell because they wanted to move up or move down.
Right.
And don't want to do that because they don't want to take on a 7.5% mortgage when the mortgage they're in is 2.5%.
Well, that's for sure. But as we've always said, you don't want to marry the rate. You marry the house, right?
Right. You date the rate. You marry the house. But right. the idea there is you have a lot. That's part of why this tightening in that.
What you're saying, because the prices aren't going off the hook, people are holding on to the property.
Right, they're holding on because they're foreseeing, well, wait, I'm paying 2.5 right now. If I go to buy something else and finance it, I'm going to be paying 7 or 7.5.
Right, because you got to live somewhere, right?
So I can stay in where I'm at. So should I consider renting instead, right? And so let's talk about, some of the reasons that you would rent, right? So the first is generally it has been less expensive to rent than to own from a monthly payment standpoint. Again, that's starting to get turned on its head as well nowadays.
Right.
That you're starting to see, depending on where you are and what suburb, city, state you're in, rents are starting to become more than what a monthly mortgage cost is.
Yeah, a lot of kids just starting out in their 20s, early 30s, trying to rent a place, especially if it's in a city like Boston or New York or something like that. A lot of them just can't do it on their own. When you're talking $4 or $5 grand a month for a rent,
right?
Crazy, yeah.
Right. However, renting is flexible. Right. If I don't like where I'm at, or I'm in that early time where I might be switching jobs or switching places, once my term is up, I can just pull up stakes and go.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, especially like you said, if you bounce it, if you're just starting off and you're going from job to job, and you're trying to find your place, or even, hey, I want to try this city out. Maybe I want to
Right,
try
exactly,
an
yeah.
area, and before I go and buy something, I can rent and see if I like the area, and go from there. Um,
Yeah, and you don't have the responsibility, that go along with owning a home, right? Because, most of it being packaged in, right? Whether it's okay, I've got to pay utilities, maybe you don't, but I don't have to worry if something leaks. It's not my responsibility. Somebody else has got to fix that.
right, and, so a lot of people today just aren't handy. They don't want to have to worry about fixing something.
Right.
Right, I just want to show up and leave, and everything works, and everything's shoveled, and
Everything's taken care
I
of.
can flush the
And
toilet and it works. I mean, right.
right. And let's face it, if we're worrying or have debt, taking on a home is more debt. Now it's good debt, but it's still debt that still has to get paid. And that becomes worrisome for some folks. Whereas if I'm in a place that suddenly becomes too expensive, I can just move someplace else that's less expensive.
Right. I mean, the real key here is, it's how long do you plan on being in a particular place, and are you worried about building equity?
Right, right.
Because
Yeah, and then we get into the factors, right? In terms of home ownership,
Mhm.
right? And we'll touch on mortgage rates and pricing trends in a second. But like you just said, that whole idea of addressing, do I want to build up equity?
Right.
This is something I own. This is mine now. As long as I make the payment, the mortgage payment, nobody can take it away from me.
Yes or no?
Well, let's put it this way. No, nobody can come to me and say, hey, we're changing we decided to make it all condos, you have to move out, or we decided to change the rent for this month. So now it's going to be exponentially more. I just had this happen with a client who was
Yeah.
telling me that the person who owned the property passed away.
Yeah.
It passed to the kids, and the kids immediately stepped in and said, we're changing the rent, everything's going up like the next month type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, ownership has its privileges in that regard, where, if you want to redo the kitchen, you want to add on, you want to do, paint it purple and with polka dots, that's your business, right? I mean, it's
Right, and you can't do that in rent. Well, you can, but you got to ask permission and
right, because it's
all
not
sorts of
yours.
stuff. Right.
Yeah, so there is some pride that comes with home ownership and all the stuff that goes along with that, being king of your own castle, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, then it comes down to, cost factors and convenience.
And so the trends right now, basically looking at it, and again across the country, the national average right now on a 30-year mortgage is 7.5%.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy compared to a year ago.
Well, compared to where what right? Yeah. And last time it was above 7 was 20 years ago. Think about that.
Wow, early
20 years
2000s.
ago.
Yeah.
You know, the early 2000s, basically, all the craziness that went on back then,
Mhm.
But mortgage, one good thing here with this is that mortgages, housing, it does get affected immediately upon the interest rate increases. However, a lot of it's sort of already, housing, much like Wall Street, has already sort of gone through the pain, and now it's coming down the other side, right? You're starting to see, like you said, some of these properties are coming onto the market that hadn't come onto the market before. There's a little bit more inventory coming out there. You're starting to see, this idea of the better credit scoring individuals getting lower rating. And the trend will probably get this down, like it says. I don't know if it'll be this year, but certainly the beginning or spring of next year, more into a reasonable, probably 5.5 range
Right.
from 7.5.
Right.
And as we talked about, the whole idea is, look, if I can buy it now and I can afford or at least make the payments at 7.5, when it goes to 5.5, I can always refinance.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that happens though, when rates get high like this, is the pricing on property slows down. Right, so it may be a good time to buy just because you may get a good price, even though you don't like the interest rate.
Right, like you said, some of that is that scaling back, is that the price, there's no more of that bidding war, that craziness getting, 50 to 100,000 over the asking price, or, the valuation of the property. You're getting more in line with buying what the property is worth.
Right, so if you're hitting, say, December, January, and you got an 8% rate, you may get a deal on a house as far as
Right.
price wise goes. It may actually start bringing the pricing down. So, and then you get the best of both worlds. If a year later, you can refinance it.
Yeah, if it gets down into the fives, then you're shaving points and you got a good deal on the home.
Yeah, right. So timing is everything.
Right. Well, and again, depending on what you're trying to do, like we said, buying versus renting, there are definitely advantages on both. But I think we touched on a lot of them there, where you're building, the appreciation. So you're building equity in the property. So, there's the first thing. You get tax advantages, right, that come along with home ownership. As you said, you can be as creative, or so long as you're within, I guess, the planning town or whatever your rules are, you can be as crazy as you want with it.
Right.
You can put up fences, privacy. You don't have to worry about, somebody next door or a neighbor upstairs or whatever, unless you own the two family type of thing.
Mhm.
But, if something goes wrong, you're the landlord. You've got to deal with it.
Yeah, right. Maintenance is, you got to stay up on the maintenance, and it's all on you. I mean, that's why you got to make sure your proper insurance and upkeep on the property and all of that.
Right. And like we said, for the bulk of most of this, for most people, in terms of dealing with the renting side of the equation, is all timing. Like Craig said, it's all about how long or what your plan is. If you're going to be moving about and the possibility of leaving the city that you're in or the area that you're in within, say, 3 or 5 years, well, then renting is probably the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, where renting falls apart, I think, is when you get older, right? Now you've been renting your whole life. Now you're maybe approaching retirement, and you go, "Oh, what am I going to do now?" The issue is because you can't control rent pricing going forward, so this becomes housing
Yeah,
big unknown in retirement if you're renting.
right.
Whereas if you say you owned a home that whole time, maybe the home is too big for you now. Now you can downsize, use the equity to purchase something smaller, even a condo, but at least you have a known element of what housing is going to cost you.
And like you said, you have to live somewhere, right?
Right, you gotta live somewhere. You go live with your kids, I guess.
Well, that's a different conversation. But if you don't have kids,
But if you don't have kids, right? So yeah, so it's really something you want to take, really take into consideration. There's pluses and minuses to both.
yeah. And again, we'll talk about it at the end, where we talk about the financial considerations and everybody's individual journey in terms of dealing with that. All right, but let's go to the next one, which is the buy versus leasing a car, right? So leasing a car, right? It costs less upfront. You've got certain time, and in most of them are usually 2 or 3 years, right? That you're in this lease arrangement. You have a certain amount of miles that's part of the deal when you go into it, that you have. And it's just like renting the house. You don't pay for anything because it's not yours, right? Oil change, and if you ding something, you are responsible. But as far as the ongoing upkeep to the vehicle, that's on the dealership for any of that might come into play.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that you got to keep in mind is most leases are 3 to 4 years, so you're getting a new car every couple of years, which is nice. You're always upgrading to another vehicle. Sometimes the price to lease is cheaper than the price to buy, so you get more vehicle for less money.
Right. Yeah, and is actually depending on the vehicle, right? The idea of, because your price at the time you sign the lease, the buyout, if it's available, is done at that time.
Right, so
So
that happens in the future, right?
Right. So now most cars we know depreciate automatically once you drive off the lot. But as you had realized over the last couple of years, what went on with the whole chip thing and everything else, that a lot of used cars were going up in value. And so had you been in a lease arrangement, more than likely is that you could have turned around, bought out the car and turned around and sold it at about the same price.
Yeah, it's just a weird market the last couple of years, that's for sure. And who would have saw that coming?
Yeah. You know, that
Just
it is,
always
I will
continue.
give you another one. I'll give you another one for lease just before we get into buying, because
Yeah.
it's a weird little one. So EV vehicles, right? So the
Okay.
electric vehicles. Most electric vehicles won't let you have the buyout clause. Most, yeah, if you find one with a lease, that often the lease is just for the time period, the 3 years or 4 years, like you said, and there's no buyout available because they know that they're gonna be worth, right, that, you know, in terms of dealing with it.
Wow.
However, there is, because you're leasing, you don't qualify for the EV tax credit. However,
So they get the credit, right?
there is a workaround with the leasing company that does it in a commercial version, that if you do it, then you can get a portion of it applied to your lease arrangement.
Oh, okay.
So you could get a lower dollar amount based on it and deal with it that way. So it's an interesting loophole that I saw. I'm like, huh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so what about buying? Well, buying usually costs more, as we just talked about, especially if you're trying to do it without paying, you know, a monthly number, whatever they're charging you.
Yeah.
To go through it, it's usually all right, I'm putting a chunk of cash or a whole boatload of cash up front, so that I will have smaller monthly payments based on whatever they're charging me for interest. You know, I want to say the one with my daughter was like, I think it was 3.5, might have been 4
Interest?
interest that they were charging, that they wanted to charge on it. And I was like, this is crazy, you know, but you know, that's what happens in terms of it, right? You know, if you come into a windfall, you can just pay it off.
Yeah.
It's yours. It's an interesting one though, where it says you can sell or trade it in whenever.
Yeah.
That's another one of this weird little cycle that's going on, that a lot of cars that were purchased over the last 2 years are underwater, appreciatively underwater, not just the normal depreciation number,
Right.
right? So if I was trying to trade it in, the problem is the dealership won't take it now because it's so far underwater
Right.
that I have to pay additional money
To get rid of it.
to get rid of it
Yeah.
versus just trading it in.
Right. Well, if you finance a big portion of it, correct.
Right. You know, so it's one of those, like Craig said, it's, you know, a really unprecedented time here, and especially for cars. Cars are in a weird, real place because the used car price jacked up so high with the whole chip thing. They haven't really come down. New cars have come down slightly,
Yeah.
but used cars haven't, that the number hasn't really come down significantly yet.
Still a big demand. Yep.
Still a big demand, and you're starting to see, in the, you know, with new cars at the rates and what's going on with the interest rates, somebody's looking for used cars,
Yeah.
and those prices still haven't come down. So it's difficult, you know, and the rates, you know, you're not getting any deals on used cars for interest rates.
Nope. Nope. But you know, like you have here, you don't have to worry about mileage. So if you're someone who drives more than 15,000 miles a year, you know, a lease could cost you additional money.
Correct.
Right. More expensive than buying. So in this respect, you know, you can drive it as far as, you know, as far as you want and have to worry about it.
Right. And if you're somebody who's going to buy and hold, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to have this car and I'm going to buy it, you know, I'm going to drive it, take care of it, do the maintenance on it, and have it for the next 7 to 10 years, then you're better off buying.
And the other thing is some people just rough on vehicles, right? You got an active family and, you know, dings happen and stains happen and all kinds of stuff happens. And leasing companies can end up charging you for the repairs on the vehicle in that respect. So maybe another.
Correct. Oh, yeah, as far as the lease is concerned, I thought you were gonna say, but if you own it, you can beat the crap out of it, it doesn't matter.
Well, that is true. But right, it doesn't cost you extra except when you go to trade it in.
When you go to sell it, and all of those dings and stains and everything else count against you. But
Right.
if you're gonna hold it, if you're gonna buy the car and drive it for at least, say, 7 to 10 years, buying is the way to go. Like Craig said, if you're one of those people who needs, I gotta have a reliable new car that I don't want to have to think about sort of the whole renting mentality. I can just bring it someplace, they're gonna fix whatever's wrong with it and take care of it because it's their car, and I can just walk away at the end of the time period, then leasing might be the way to go.
My mother, she drives 5,000 miles a year, lives in a small town. She leases a vehicle, costs her a couple $100 a month. And every 2 years, the leasing company comes back and gives her a new vehicle because she has so low mileage on it that they rather just give, here's another vehicle, we're gonna take that one and sell it.
Yeah,
So for her, it's a perfect situation.
right.
She always has a brand new car and it's always got.
She doesn't have to worry, and she's not gonna go over the mileage, and
Costs are almost nothing. So
Right.
yeah.
again, it depends on the individual situation. All right. So using credit versus, we already talked about, credit versus cash, who wins that battle, right? But this is more about getting caught in the whole tendency of what happens when we use credit cards way too frequently, way too often. And we tend to, overspend. Craig, this is something we drive home a lot with people about, understanding, how you're spending, when you're spending, but more importantly, why you're spending.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the cons that come with credit cards aren't the credit cards themselves. It's us not being disciplined in the way that we use them.
Right.
Right. I mean, sure, they make the traps easy to fall into, but we're the ones that see the traps and fall into them.
Correct. We just keep stepping on the same landmine over and over and over again in terms of doing it. But some of that with the, the difference there with credit cards is clearly if you miss payments or fall behind on your payments, it all starts to blow up on you, which doesn't happen with cash, because if you didn't have it, you couldn't buy it. So, that's the difference with cash.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, the thing about credit cards is someone's got to give you permission to use money.
Right.
Right. Cash, you don't need someone else's permission to use it. So there's more security in that. Because you have.
Right. And so, here's what's going on with and I didn't change the next piece in this slide, right? It's actually not. That number has gone dramatically north.
Yeah, probably more like 5,000.
No, it's 8.
Holy crap, really?
Yeah. Right. The idea here is that the average credit card, the interest rate rise, well, was 16.5%. As of this year, February 2023, the average was 20.92%.
Wow.
That's because the interest rates increases. That's because people have held off and what they've done and so on. And all of that combines together into this perfect storm. You're talking about almost paying 21% interest on credit card debt.
They're putting loan sharks out of business, man. They're getting higher to them.
Crazy, right? And so with that, right now, as of 2023, 1 in 5, about 20% of people with credit card debt are saying it's going to take longer to pay that off because of what's happened, because of the interest rates, because of the costs, because of the things going on.
Right.
33% of them say nobody else knows how much they owe.
Well, you don't usually put a billboard on yourself and walk around telling people how much you owe, right?
I will tell you, in married couples, the number is slightly worse. It's 34% say the other spouse doesn't know how much one spouse has in credit card debt.
Wow.
Because we don't talk about it. So we don't admit to it. This is more of a shame thing, right? And in terms of not talking about these things. And then this is what I was saying
too. I wouldn't worry about the debt. You probably got other issues.
Right. But But then, like I said, the average debt as of the end of last year was $8,000.
Wow.
The average credit card debt. And so when we look at that and just go through it, and all this tries to show you is, all right, if you had $8,000 and you're only getting charged 20% interest and you tried to pay it off in 1 year,
Mhm.
you'd still end up paying $900 and almost $1,000 in interest in 1 year. In
Wow.
3 years, it goes to almost $3,000 of interest.
Yeah.
And in 5 years, you would have paid almost $5,000 in interest. That's over half the amount that you had originally borrowed in interest.
Right. Well, I'm sure a lot of this has happened too, because a lot of people blew through what we call emergency reserves going through COVID and haven't had a chance to replenish those.
They haven't been able to put it back, and there's something happened, they had to turn to the credit card. We understand why it happens.
Right.
It just, you got to be aware of what the cost ultimately down the line is with everything that you do.
It also tells you enough people aren't watching our Think with a Drink episodes, or we're gonna have it happening this issue.
Clearly, clearly, people got to be drinking more, is what's going on.
Well, not the specialty beer. That's the issue. That's why I'm.
Yes, yeah. All right, so we talked a little bit about this, right? Your own personal financial goals, right? So sort of the question is, especially if we're talking about home ownership, right? Why do you want to own a home? What is it about that? A lot of, especially going back to when the housing bubble collapsed, back in the 2007, 2008, the lead up to that was the whole premise of this is the American dream, right? This is the whole thing that I'm gonna get the white picket fence in my own property, and that's the American dream.
Yep.
Well, is that relevant for you, right? This is something everybody has to ask. Is this something that what does it mean to you when you look at it? And is this something that you really want to go through? Because I don't think, Craig, that a lot of people sort of realize all those extra costs and extra expenses that go along with home ownership.
Yeah, I mean, employers love to see their employees have large obligations, like a mortgage or kids or any of those types of things, because now they're more motivated to work, right? Because they got to pay for these large obligations. I mean, I've owned a home, you've owned a home for over 20 years. There's a lot of that goes into it. The security of knowing that you have the home, and knowing that your payment is fixed, so you know what it's going to be every month. Being able to do what you want with the property, all that, the equity that builds up inside the property as well. So there's lots of good things that do come with that. But you got to be prepared, just like anything. Like someone going, I'm going to go buy a puppy. Well, you don't realize that you'll just buy it, right?
Not just the puppy. There's a lot to go along with it, right? And so, when we get into this, when looking at some of the, it's so funny that I've just heard this another economist. We listen a lot to people in terms of what they're saying, and the whole idea here that the Federal Reserve Bank still has not rung the bell on we're in a recession. But it's clear that we're going into a recession because all of the indicators point there. However, like we talked about, I think housing has sort of already started to, much like the markets, to come out of it, right? Because it's sort of been this prolonged process that didn't just happen, so it'll be interesting to see. But I think from everything that we talked about, where housing is starting to the pricing coming down, inventory coming on, interest rates moving in a positive direction eventually as we go forward, the pause was the first step, that type of thing. I think that all says things will be better in housing.
Well, my ear to the ground with all the people I've been talking to, it seems like because of COVID once again, not to mention it because I have it, but that a lot of people were now working remotely.
Yes.
And you're seeing people move to areas that they would not have moved to previously because they're not worried about commuting to work.
Right.
So you're seeing upticks in marketplaces that probably shouldn't be showing upticks in marketplaces because people are moving to more rural locations. So I think the housing market is just a really weird animal right now
Yeah.
for all those different reasons.
Right, and again, we bring recession into it because it's sort of been hanging around the whole time. Our belief and what we have said is that we're already in a recession. The Fed just hasn't rung the bell and said it, but as far as we're concerned, we're in it, which is why it's funny that when you listen to some of these economists and these power people that they talk about these things, that they're like, well, yeah, it'll probably be as simple, maybe just be one quarter or two. In terms of being in a recession, I'm saying, yeah, because we've already been in it for 2 or 3 quarters, you just haven't said that.
But visually, you don't see it. I mean, you go out, everybody's out entertaining themselves. Every place is busy. Traffic is high. People.
Oh, yeah, traffic today is brutal. I mean, I don't know if
people are going on vacations. I know you've got one coming.
Yeah.
I'm coming. I mean, we even had a guy who does, home improvements and said, "Oh, I think it's going to get slow," and all of a sudden his phone's ringing off the hook.
Right.
Where are these people getting the money from?
Yeah,
So
I mean,
people are fighting this recession business. They don't want to hear it.
Yeah, no, they are just batting it off. I will tell you that has been one of the things that they've just been batting it off, and that's part of what's driving the Fed crazy. Because the Fed's like, that's not supposed to happen. We're
Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep.
Yeah. Come down, and it's not doing it. And so the Fed's like, well, I don't know what else to do. And so, that's sort of what's happening here. All right. So for everybody out there, listen, part of what we do is try to have conversations with you, sort of figure out, what's in your mind. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And how can we sort of help guide you, support you into what you're trying to do, whether that's home ownership or questions on buying versus leasing, or just getting a better handle on what you're doing with your money. That's why we're here. You can shoot the QR code on the screen. You can see the link that's on there as well. We're happy to have a conversation. You go to the website, you got to contact us. There's different ways that you can get to us. We're happy to have a conversation, help you out in any way we can. And then we'll keep the Think with a Drink theme going with what's on tap. And so next week, we're going to do halfway there. This is a mid-year review, right? So this is going to be a sort of a battle royale where Craig and I, one of us is going to take the pro side, and one of us is going to take the con side of what's happening, where we're headed, what's going on. And normally, if you know any of this that goes through, that I'm going to have the doom and gloom, Craig is going to have why it's all going to be, sunshine and unicorns, basically.
So we're not flipping a coin on it?
No. And then we're going to go on a summer break. We're going to go on a summer break. We decided we would take the summer. We're going to revamp. We're going to go through some of what we've been doing with the show. We're going to come back, more positive, more configured. We're going to have podcasts to go along with it, more guests, more topics, more content. And so we'll come back refreshed after Labor Day as far as that's concerned. But you can always reach out to us. You can go to the website again, ariesfoundation.org. You can email us. It's info@ariesfoundation.org, or just shoot the QR code and schedule a time. We're happy to meet with you. But other than that, Greg, I am going to say I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
You can get over the COVID thing. And then I am going to say good night.